So, hi everyone, my name is Lola. I'm a first year PhD student here at the University of Cambridge, and today I'm joined by Daniel Eisenstein and Roberto Maiolino, who are two of the founding members of JADES. And so the topic of this video is just, discussing the JADES survey, how it came to be, and what it is now. So maybe you can both start by introducing yourselves, where you work, your position, and your role in JADES. Do you want to start?
My name is Daniel Eisenstein. I'm on the faculty at Harvard. I'm currently chair of the astronomy department there. And I've been involved with JWST since 2001, which is a fairly long time in the past, but active in JADES since the start of the survey.
My name is Roberto Maiolino. I'm professor of experimental astrophysics here at the University of Cambridge and also professor at University College London. And I've been in James Webb since 2004 when I joined the instrument science team of NIRSpec and have been active then in JADES together with Daniel. Yeah.
Great, thanks. And so you just mentioned, so you're part of the NIRSpec instrument team and you're part of the NIRCam instrument team. Can you briefly explain, what that means? How are these teams created and how you both came to be part of them? Do you want to start us off?
So James Webb Space Telescope has 4 instruments, and each of these instruments has a group of scientists and engineers that have to design and construct the instruments. And so although most of that work is very detailed engineering and construction, these teams all have groups of scientists associated with them to make sure that the instruments are getting guidance about their science utilization so that they're being designed appropriately. And so in both cases, I think the PIs approached us to join these instrument teams at an early stage. And that means that along the way, we were guiding this by reviewing requirements and just generally being available to consult with the engineers and instrumentalists as the projects went along. And then as we get closer to launch, we were designing the guaranteed time observations that the instrument teams would then carry out to explore the capabilities of the instruments on orbit and to assure that things were working properly.
A similar story as Daniel. It's slightly different because in my case, I was involved, I was asked in 2004 by the European Space Agency because the NIRSpec instrument has been led and developed directly by the ESA, the European Space Agency. And so similarly, we have been in charge of guiding the instrument design, optimizing it to make sure that it would achieve the primary science goals. And as a reward of all of this effort across essentially nearly 20 years, yes, we have been given an amount of observing time that we could use. And then, as we'll discuss, we decided to join efforts with the NIRCam team because it made a lot of sense in terms of synergies.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I was going to ask you next. So you each of the instrument team had general time that was reserved for them to do science, and so each of your teams had this. How did it come about that you decided, okay, maybe we should join forces and use this time in a synergetic way?
Well, essentially was pretty much obvious since early in our activities that we needed each other because NIRSpec is an extremely powerful instrument in the sense that it can simultaneously obtain spectra for hundreds of galaxies and targets more generally. But it needs some information to select the targets, in particular imaging and multiband photometry, in particular to select the targets in the earliest epochs of the universe, but also the revolution at later epochs. So we needed information from NIRCam to identify the targets, but also subsequently to characterize their morphology and so on. On the other hand, NIRCam needs NIRSpec to confirm the cosmological distance of the targets and also to characterize several of their properties, for which in some cases you need, in several cases, you need spectroscopic information, so about the content of the interstellar medium, stellar population, and so on. So it was clear that it was a win-win situation, and also the two teams have a complementary expertises, both in the area of imaging, but also scientific and in spectroscopy, and also in terms of scientific expertise, in terms of characterization of the properties of galaxies and their evolution. So it was a clear joint venture that was absolutely beneficial for both of the teams.
I completely agree. The idea is, I think, within both teams to do projects on deep exposures on the sky, to be pushing towards the faintest limits of galaxies. I think these date back to the earliest proposals and concepts, but in both cases, the teams sort of were writing those proposals from the point of view of their own individual instrument, knowing that we would have to find a solution down the road to bring the imaging and spectroscopy together, because these two are, they're peanut butter and jelly. You got to put them together. And so I think that while the telescope was still in its early phases and launch was so far away, it was not, there was just not the pressing need to figure that problem out. Mm-hmm. But around the middle of around 2014, things were converging towards launch. And so Pierre Ferruit and Marcia Ricci, I think at that point really galvanized the groups to come to a collaborative agreement. That was actually relatively straightforward. Pierre and others, I think you were there with.
Yeah, I think they became at Harvard in 2000.
So a handful of NIRSpec people came over to Harvard in 2015, and a handful of the NIRCam people came, and it was a very honestly straightforward meeting because the synergies were so clear, and I think, and it was also, I think, clear early on that with the leadership of Marcia and Pierre, that the teams were ready to join together from a sociological point of view. So it's actually been it was a very straightforward collaboration to forge. And at that point, the detailed development of the plan could start to come together. That's, this all took. Well, we were given more years than we wanted because when we started that, the telescope was supposed to launch in 2018. So
it was good in the end because we were just a bunch of us. I think we were maybe less than 20, maybe in total. And then in the meantime, we created a lot of new people, expertise. Right. So in the end, we could build up a very efficient and well-organized team. So it was. I mean, in the end, it wasn't so bad.
Have that extra time.
Yeah, everybody needed the time.
Yeah, fair enough. And so at this meeting, I guess that's when the idea of JADES came together. Is there some kind of story behind the name, or was it we're just trying to piece together the words of the collaboration?
Well, the name came later, and my recollection is that this was, a group of the more junior people in the collaboration coming together, trying to figure out a reasonable name. And there were a few different acronyms that were floated. But I think once this one was floated, I think it came to pretty quick acclamation. It was a prettier name, so it worked well.
Yeah, it is a great name. And I guess what I wanted to ask about was, so this was the buildup of the survey. So you had to have a common science goal, and of course there's loads of things you can do with all the JADES data. But what was kind of the unifying concept that led you to maybe plan your observations the way you did in those specific fields? What was the driving scientific force behind the organization?
If I wouldn't say that there had to be a common science goal, because the survey is so massive, so extensive, that it actually touches a broad range of science goals. It's really comprehensive on several aspects of galaxy formation and evolution. Obviously, one of the main drives were the earliest galaxies, identifying how the first stellar populations formed and how, and also how these were connected with the formation of the first black holes. So it was clear that for everyone, the priority was pushing towards the most distant galaxies, what Daniel likes to refer to as the redshift frontier, that pushing is as much as possible. But on the other hand, there is a broad range of other science cases in understanding how galaxies subsequently evolve and transform across the cosmic epochs and therefore evolving the kind of galaxies that we see in the local universe in terms of chemical enrichment, morphologies, stellar population, and so on. And I think in the survey we are essentially providing major progress in all of these areas through this combined imaging and spectroscopic approach.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think that the survey design was subject to a number of different constraints, and we certainly, I think, recognized that we had to get deep enough data to really push to the youngest, highest redshift galaxies, and maintaining an adequate reserve of time to go deep in some area was, I think, one of the tricky things. But we also knew that we needed to cover enough area to be able to support a pretty broad spectroscopic science plan, and to be able to cover enough of the universe at redshifts, say 3 to 8, that we could get to reasonable samples. So I think we were really driven, I think, pretty early on to we need a deep pointing, and we also need a medium level depth, and the details of pulling that off, even though we had a very generous time allocation, it really is, it was definitely a push and pull in getting that to come together. But I'm happy that the survey, I think we were able to get to a good solution, and as Roberto said, it really, these deep imaging and spectroscopic surveys, multi-object spectroscopic surveys, inevitably serve a wide range of science cases, and so that's one of the fun aspects of these surveys, is you get to take one data set, focus your efforts on getting a good data set, on getting it reduced properly, but then many different science interests, people with many different interests, can come together to utilize it, and so this allows everybody to learn from each other, that we're actually getting exposure to topics that we don't usually work on. And so I think that's one of the energizing aspects of the survey.
Yeah, no, definitely. And so was there, I guess probably because of also the other coverage from previous surveys, but was there a specific reason why you chose that patch of sky, the Goods North and Goods South fields, to cover specifically, or was it more of a logical kind of decision?
Well, the Goods North and Goods South fields have been the premier deep fields on the sky since 1996. So in 1996, the Hubble Space Telescope created the Hubble Deep Field. That was I think a real watershed moment in extragalactic astronomy for the high redshift universe, and people began across many different wavelengths, many different telescopes began to focus their attention towards that field because of the resource that the Hubble Space Telescope images brought to that spot on the sky. And then as the Spitzer telescopes and Chandra telescopes got launched, there was the GOODS program that aimed to capitalize on one deep field in the north and one deep field on the south. That was a very important data set. And then the Hubble Ultra Deep Field got placed in the middle of the GOODS South field. So it's just sort of this unstable situation where once there's great data in a field, people want to make their next effort to improve the data. And so the two fields have just been gathering momentum for 25 years. And so we hope that JADES is the next major push in these fields.
Yeah, hopefully. Sounds great. Okay, so another very broad question, but what would you say, I get you both worked a lot in the science, but also in the leadership, steering committee aspect of JADES. What would you say were some of the biggest challenges or more unexpected challenges with this whole big collaboration?
Well, it's the whole survey requires a very, sequence of steps and tasks that have to be undertaken often on a tight time frame, and each of them has to be coordinated and happen in a certain manner so that doesn't affect the following steps. So you have to plan the observations in a certain way that is optimized, as Daniel has hinted. And then once the data come, especially the NIRCam imaging has to be processed quite quickly, understand all of the potential issues and fix them very, very quickly. Because then we need to construct a catalog of targets, out of which we select the optimal targets for designing the spectroscopic observation with NIRSpec, which happens often on a short time scale. So we don't have much time to do this. So this requires a very accurate and precise coordination and making sure that we have this information in time. Then design the observations with NIRSpec, and then when these data come, of course, go also through the data processing of the spectroscopic data, analyze them, confirm, and this cosmological distance for many of them, start characterizing them. And then, of course, there is the whole part of scientific exploitation, which is both on the NIRCam side and on the NIRSpec side. And especially in more lately, this kind of information is being merged together to get a comprehensive understanding of these distant galaxies. And this requires, of course, also coordination at the scientific level in terms of making sure that we don't overlook anything which is important, especially given that we are entering in a totally uncharted territories with these depths. So there are a lot of unexpected new discoveries that we were sometimes unprepared to interpret them. So we have to understand what the data in the context of this new domain that we are exploring.
Do you have anything to add? Or?
No, I think that's a very good answer.
Okay, great. And as kind of to wrap up, again, very broad question, but what is something that you were really excited about in this sort of first year of JADES, maybe a result or something that surprised you that you think was very cool? And then, or something that you're looking forward to in the next sort of year when you get the next batch of data.
Well, I don't know if it's quite surprising, but to me, the most evocative aspect of JADES has been just how pretty the images are. You go and just, they're just really gorgeous. You get to explore the universe at, with to faint flux levels that have never been explored before, looking at these distant objects and looking at them in all these different band passes and colors. And you just sort of get confronted with the complexity of the universe and the overall evolution of galaxies from their earliest moments on to today. And I find that part to be extremely energizing.
I agree.
So that's not quite the science result, but in some ways it is kind of the science result. Like the universe is really complicated and beautiful, and that's beyond sort of some quantification of things. I think that's
no, definitely. And being able to visualize it in such a way is very novel. I think it's really beautiful. Yeah.
Well, it's a difficult call to define what is the most exciting, because there are so many. Every day we find, this is super cool, super exciting. I would say what is most exciting is probably the unexpected results, because it would have been, a little bit disappointing if we just would confirm some previous or sometimes incremental expectations. So the finding, for instance, that these early galaxies are so bursty, so evolving so much more turbulent way than their later epochs and more massive galaxies, which was somehow expected, but maybe not at this level, to the point that we find even galaxies that managed to completely shut off because of their extreme burstiness. The finding of completely weird chemical enrichment in their interstellar medium that we didn't really expect, and we still struggle to understand. The finding of black holes that may be evolving in more massive ones, but we don't understand yet how this is happening, because the way they are accreting matter and the way they are evolving with their co-evolving with their host galaxies. So there is a number of results that maybe the exciting part is that we still struggle to understand them.
Definitely, yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much for joining and for your long-term investment in JWST and JADES. I think it's safe to say it really paid off. So thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.